Good afternoon, as everyone is coming in. Welcome and thanks for joining us. We'll just start with the first couple of minutes as people join, sort their tech, sort out their and all the usual of meeting shenanigans. So, hi. I've put up an initial screen there. First thing is, if nobody could put their camera on, that would be great. Just keep your camera off for the purposes of this. And if you can change your name, you can do that by hovering over yourself. And there should be 3 little dots, which will allow you to change your name. If you just change it to your first name, great. We are going to record the session, so we just want to make sure that everyone is suitably anonymous. So don't activate your camera, and if you can mute yourselves and change your name, that would be fantastic. So welcome everybody, just getting everybody in from the waiting room. So we'll give it a couple of minutes just as everyone gets sorted out. So if everyone can put themselves on mute as they come in, that would be great. Otherwise we end up with an awful lot of noise and feedback and interruptions. So if everyone can mute themselves, which if you haven't used Zoom before, at the very bottom of your screen on the left-hand side, there should be a microphone button to keep yourself on mute and a camera button so that you can keep yourself switched off. That would be great. And it would be great as well if everyone could change their name to just their first name. So if you hover your mouse over your picture, you should see 3 dots, which will allow you to then change your name. If everyone can just change to their first name, that would be great. And feel free to say hello in the chat box. Looks like a few of you have already found the chat box. Hello everybody, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Just going to give the first couple of minutes as people arrive. I've got a few of my colleagues with us as well, so they might say hello. And they're going to be here to field questions in the chat box. I suspect I'll probably struggle for time to be keeping an eye on the chat box as I'm presenting. But my colleagues are here. I've got 3 colleagues plus some other representatives of accounting awarding bodies will hopefully give us a fun-packed and informative session this afternoon. Still got people coming in. We're up to 90 or so now. Still got people coming in through the waiting room. So just give it another minute or so. If you all want to say hello in the chat box, that would be marvelous. And hello to all of you. Still got people coming in. This seems to be the first 5 minutes of most online meetings that I tend to attend, is the shuffling in of people, setting up their tech. So if everyone can mute themselves, keep your microphones off, change your name to just your first name, that would be fantastic. And we'll be able to make a start very short already. 35. Welcome, everybody. Hopefully you can see on my icon, my name is Gareth. I'm going to be hosting this session, and in fact, for the next 3 weeks, for those of you planning to see it through the whole 4 sessions. I'm a qualified accountant, and I teach accountancy and have done for, nearly 25 years now. I've been training accountants, so hopefully there's not much I haven't come across that help answer. If there is anything I haven't come across, we've got a number of other experienced experts with us. So nearly to 100 people. That's fantastic to see such interest in accountancy. It is, I think, the trendy qualification, trendy career path these days. Nobody wants to be a lawyer anymore, do they? It's all about finance and accountancy. So just give it another 30 seconds, a few more people coming in, and then we will make a start. Feel free, hello in the chat box, a few colleagues on the call who will be similarly. Let's take another drink, and then we can get on. Now, we are going to record this session. So it would be great if, I'm just going to shut down my screen share so we can start the recording. We are going to record the session. So it'd be great if keep your videos off, keep yourselves on mute. Any questions you have, you can put through the chat box. And if you just keep your name as your first name, that'd be fantastic. We're going to record it because we're going to send out the recording to all those registered. So you guys will all get a copy of the recording if there's anything you want to re-watch. But as with any of these things, we're not going to get full attendance from everybody who has registered. So they'll get copies so they review at their leisure. So I'm about to kick off the recording. And if I then go back and share my screen. And we can make a bit of a start. So welcome, thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Gareth John. I have been training accountants for, well, something like 24 years, I think now, for various different accountancy qualifications, but particularly we're going to be focusing and talking about AAT and ICAEW this afternoon. I'm one of the directors of a company called First Intuition. We're effectively a college. We train accountants for their various accountancy exams. I'm joined by a number of my colleagues. So if you've got specific questions, put them in the chat box, which you should find at the bottom of the screen. My colleagues can pick up on that. And actually, we hopefully will have time at the end of the session for a bit of a Q&A session to pick up on anything that people have missed as we've gone along. So in terms of how we can engage, so in terms of the summer school, we normally run these actually in our offices. We've got a number of offices all around the UK where we deliver our training. We normally do summer schools in our offices, which obviously hasn't been possible under the current circumstances. So we made a decision a few weeks ago to run virtual online schools, and actually the take has been very good. Pleased with the people interested, and we're going to be running it. You can attend as many or as few of these sessions as you want. We're actually going to be running it as 4 sessions starting today, so I'll be then hosting sessions for the next 3 weeks as well. So today we're going to be talking about some of the general routes into accountancy, and in fact some of the roles within the world of accountancy and finance. Next week, we're actually then going to be looking at some interactive exercises just to try and give a bit of an idea of what those roles actually involve, the kind of activities and tasks that people working in finance do. Week 3 on the 11th of August, I'm often asked by young adults who are interested in accountancy, I'm often asked what skills accountancy relies on. So we're actually going to have a whole session looking at specifically those skills, and it will probably surprise you. For instance, being mathematical isn't a particular necessity for being an accountant. And then in the final session, 3 weeks today, we're actually going to have a little bit of a look at the process of actually finding a suspect on the core in that process of actually finding yourself a job in accountancy. And we're going to do some sort of CV tips and some interview tips, just thinking about perhaps some of the questions you may get asked if you're going for an interview as an accountant. In terms of the platform we're using, so we're doing this Zoom. Probably the easiest way to interact from your perspective is using the chat box at the bottom. Please feel any comments you've got, any questions you've got, just throw them into the chat box and somebody can pick them up as the session progresses. We're going through an hour and a half, probably 5 o'clock. Feel feel free, if you need to leave before that, obviously you can do. We are going to finish the session with a Q&A, so we'll be able to pick up on some specific questions, probably in the last 20 minutes or so. I'm going to run a few polls as the session develops. Probably my colleagues are laughing at me at the moment because they know I'm not the most technological person in the world, so fingers crossed I can get the poll to work correctly. It'll be interesting to get a bit of engagement and feedback from you. Key things in the chat box: don't share any of your personal information, so please don't be sharing phone numbers or email addresses yourselves on the chat boxes, because it can be seen by everybody. Please make sure you're using appropriate language in the boxes. On top, we are discussing careers and qualifications, accountancy, and as I've said, there's plenty of my colleagues. I know we've got Nick and Ben and Tim in the chat box there to actually help answer questions as they arise. But I wanted to start off with an initial poll. So let us see if I can get this to work. So I'm going to throw up an initial poll, which I'll just be interested in each of you answering, just to find out a little bit about the audience we have in front of us. So hopefully you can now see, firstly, a question about your current position. So whereabouts are you in your life journey? Are you still at school? Have you left school? Are you at university? Have you left university? And then there's a second question just about location. It's interesting to see where in the UK or even a field. I know we've had people from all around the world on these sessions in the last few weeks, so I'll just give a few seconds, let each of you have a bit of a think about that. Hopefully you're all finding the poll easily enough. And I've tried to come up with enough options to hopefully cover everybody's possible situations. Most people have already completed, so we've got a lot of people kind of Greater London, South East of England, quite a large number from Wales. He's from Wales, hence the name. Quite a lot from the West of England, quite a broad spread, a few from the rest of the world actually, so welcome to anyone around the globe. That's the joy of these sorts of sessions, obviously, is you can tune in anywhere you've got an internet connection. I'll just give another few seconds for people to complete that poll. Looks like most people here are at uni, and at uni at least for another year, so perhaps thinking in advance of where their career aspirations might take them, although we've got a few people still at school, a few people who've left school, perhaps on their way to university, a few people actually already left uni and perhaps now on the hunt for a job, which is, again, part of the purpose of one of those later sessions that I talked about. So I'm just ending the polling so we can share the results there. You see by far the most categories, like a large number of you are still at university at the moment, with perhaps at least another year to go, but then quite a few people, a total of nearly 30% who are kind of at the school or just left school stage. And in terms of location, large number there, as we said, from Greater London, good contingency from Wales, none from Scotland, unfortunately, my original home country where I was born. So that's, thank you for filling that in. So just gives us a bit of an idea of where everybody is. So let's kind of carry on now with thinking a little bit about what we're going to be doing in this session this afternoon. So as I said, it's going to last for about 60 to 90 minutes. So hopefully by the end of the session, let's think about a few takeaways. Hope we'll be able to just some of the roles in accountancy, and that's very much what I'm going to be talking about in the first phase of this session. Hopefully, and actually one of the questions we often get at the difference between working in industry and working in practice, we're particularly going to talk about that specific point. Think a little bit about different accountancy qualifications. We are joint representing two of the most prestigious accountancy qualifications, not just in the UK, but actually in the world, the AAT and the ICAEW. And I'm hoping by the end of this, you might be inspired to want to find out a little bit more about accountancy, possibly by attending the other sessions over the next 3 weeks, possibly by doing your own research. But let's dive straight into a second poll here. where I was just quite interested in what your initial thoughts about working in accountancy and finance are. So I've just come up with 10 words or phrases that I think people might think accountancy and finance is about. So can I get you to tick 3 of them? I'm hoping you should be able to tick 3 which you think best sum up the idea of accountancy and finance. I'll give you a few minutes just to have a I can already see professional is an lead. Spreadsheets coming in second at the moment. Certainly accountants can tend to use quite a few spreadsheets. So I'll just give another 20 seconds or so. So see if you can tick the 3 here that you think best sum up what you think about accountancy and finance. So just a reminder, everyone, if everyone can keep themselves muted on the call and keep their videos off, that's fantastic. Just still a few people filling in the poll. Well, let's have a look at the results for that, because that's actually quite interesting. I mean, as I said, professional definitely out there. And in fact, you know, accountancy is what's known as a profession. And I certainly think most people who work in accountancy would describe themselves as being professional in terms of their attitude to work, you know, the way they actually approach things. We've also got quite a high level for spreadsheets. You know, a lot of accountants will use spreadsheets in their calculations. We've got, you know, office job. You know, most accountants do work in offices, although increasingly I think accountants do tend to work throughout different parts of organizations. What I'm quite surprised by, very, very low for maths, and maybe because I mentioned it not too long ago, but actually, you know, you're right, actually, accountancy isn't really about maths. You certainly don't need to be particularly mathematical to be an accountant. You know, as long as you can add, subtract, multiply, and divide, that's about as much maths as is required. You know, another low one, actually, communication. Now, I'd actually argue communication is one of the most important aspects. So it's my dog's going a little bit bonkers in the background. So maths, communications, I would argue, one of the most important parts of accountancy. You know, accountancy is not really about dealing with the number crunching anymore. It's actually more about communicating information to people. But that's the sort of thing we're going to be talking about over the next few weeks. Remember, we've got that session looking at some of the key skills in accountancy. So no, that's very interesting to see. Thanks for completing that. So let's carry on then. So I wanted to talk to start with just about some of the key roles within the accountancy profession. And in fact, before I even do that, I thought I might just give a really quick overview, not in any real detail, about what's known as the flow of information in an accounting system, because accountants are generally involved in that process of dealing with the accounting system. Now, imagine an organization undertake called financial transactions. You know, every day, every month, every year, they'll be undertaking transactions. They'll be selling things, they'll be buying things, they'll be paying staff. You know, take somebody like Amazon or Tesco. Can you imagine the number of transactions, even on a daily basis, that some of these organizations are undertaking? It could even be millions a day if you think about a supermarket or somebody like Amazon. Now, each of those transactions ultimately has to be recorded. It has to be recorded somewhere so that it can flow through our accounting system. Now, those transactions will be associated with some sort of source document. There'll be some kind of piece of paper. If ever you've bought something, you may well have been given a receipt or an invoice. It may not actually be a physical piece of paper anymore. Often in this day and age, it'll just be done electronically, so it'll be sent by email, maybe stored on your hard drive. But all of those millions and millions of transactions will each have some kind of source document, some kind of record of that transaction. Now, one of the first stages in an accounting system is to take those source documents and to start listing them in our various, what are known as books of prime entry, possibly a term some of you may have come across if you've done any accountancy studies. The books of prime entry are the first place we record all of our transactions. From there, they go on to what are known as the T accounts within what's called the nominal ledger. Again, some of you may have come across the concept of T accounts. Don't worry if you haven't done, that's the kind of stuff you learn if you start learning to be an accountant. We then have from the nominal ledger, we draw up what's called a trial balance. And from the trial balance, which is done typically at the end of the year, we then create our financial statements. And financial statements are generally put together at the end of the financial year for a business. And we write what's called a P&L and a BS. Now, I've abbreviated there. The P&L, some of you might have come across the idea of a profit and loss account. It's what we do at the end of the year to actually work out if the organization has made money or lost money, if they made a profit or made a loss. And a balance sheet, as it's sometimes called, which is actually a record of things like the assets that the organization owns, things like vehicles and property they may own. Now, that is a kind of very condensed version of an overall accounting system from millions and millions of transactions all the way to a set of year-end financial statements. And the whole point of your accounting system is to make sure that that profit and loss account at the end of the year truly reflects all these transactions that the organization has undertaken. Now, there's almost two stages to this. The first few stages, which is the things that are done on a more day-to-day, week-to-week basis in the organization, this is what's sometimes called bookkeeping. Bookkeeping is when we're literally keeping the books of the business to keep these various records in our financial system. The final stage, where you take the output of all that bookkeeping and create the financial statements, or what are sometimes also called the accounts, that's the accounting. And actually, there's various roles along that journey that individuals can be involved in who are referred to as accountants or working in finance. There's actually quite a large number of different specific roles, which I thought might be useful just to talk briefly about. So, for instance, we talked a little bit about bookkeeping, and there are a variety of roles that people might undertake as bookkeepers in an organization. They're the ones who are basically making sure day to day, week to week, that all these transactions are actually being entered correctly into the records of the business. Now, if you go back a few years, they may well literally be writing things out, line by line, each individual sale be written into large books. You can imagine that doesn't really happen anymore. Most accounting is done automatically using computer packages these days. So actually an awful lot of that process is being automated. And in fact, the bookkeeper's role increasingly is just to ensure that that process is happening accurately. We've then got, as we said, the accountants who take the output from the bookkeeper's work and actually start creating the accounts, create the financial statements at the end of the year. Although there's actually, and it might be worth you being aware, there's a couple of different types of accountant. There's what are called financial accountants who do the year-end annual accounts. So they produce accounts once a year, which are sent to a place called Companies House. All companies in the UK have to record their accounts at Companies House. But there are also management accountants. You can imagine if you're running a business, you don't have to wait a whole year to see the accounts and work out what's going on. You would want to make decisions far more rapidly than that. So management accountants are a slightly different type of accountant who are producing financial information for the management of the business so that they can actually make decisions. Now you can imagine that's going to happen far more often than once a year. Management accountants might be producing information every month, possibly even every week, but actually monthly is a very common approach. And in fact, a lot of management accountants are involved in what they call month end. So at the end of each month, they produce information to report to the board so that they can then make decisions about how they run the organization. You can probably imagine the last 4 months has been really, really busy for a lot of businesses with the pandemic and the responses to the crisis. So in fact, you may find that management accountants were being asked to provide information even more regularly than every month. We then have another role, which is actually what I spent a few years of my life doing before I qualified, called an auditor. Because if you imagine, you've got this flow of information, trying to ensure that all these source documents, all these transactions are accurately reflected in the year-end accounts. The auditor's job is to actually go in after the end of the year and check whether the numbers look correct. They're kind of the police looking at whether those numbers are accurately reflected in the year-end accounts. So when I was an auditor, I wasn't producing accounts. I was going in to see if they looked like they were correct. And in fact, you often find that particularly in entry-level roles in accountancy, there's a real overlap. You know, when I was training, I used to do a little bit of auditing, so I'd be checking whether other people's accounts were correct, but actually I also did a little bit of bookkeeping. So for some of the clients that I worked with, I'd actually help them keep their records. And sometimes I'd even draw up the year-end accounts. So I was doing a little bit of all of those roles that are on the screen at the moment. Other roles you may come across, which sometimes people move into when they've qualified as accountants, are tax advisors. You can imagine if you're a specialist in understanding tax law, you can perhaps help clients to make sure they're minimizing the tax that they pay. That's a real niche specialism in accountancy, which actually has its own qualifications. Some people move into corporate finance, where they actually help organizations raise money to perhaps buy other organizations. That's really what corporate finance is about. It's sometimes described as M&A for mergers and acquisitions. We also have insolvency. Sometimes if things don't go so well for a business, it goes bust, it becomes insolvent. And again, there's another very specialist area in finance who go in to companies that have ceased trading and actually then work out what's going to happen with any remaining assets and amounts that they might owe to other people. So quite a lot of different roles there. You know, please feel free to drop questions into the chat box if you've got any specific questions about those that my colleagues can be picking up. But one of the things I love about accountancy, and some of you, if you've done any studies of kind of basic organizational management, you may have come across 3 levels within an organization, what's called operational, managerial, and strategic, often shown as a pyramid, because you tend to have fewer people at the top. That's kind of your senior board level. And one of the things I love about accountancy and finance is it's represented at all levels of that pyramid. Because even right at the very bottom, you know, at the operational level, you will have the bookkeepers, some of those, you know, sales ledger clerks, purchase ledger clerks that are doing the day-to-day transaction recording, making sure that everything's going into the accounting system correctly. It's actually a great way to start a career because you learn such a huge amount about the way finance works. But equally, accountants will also work at the managerial level. You might get finance managers and financial controllers, or FCs, who are actually taking the results of the bookkeeper's work and actually starting to analyze it and starting to bring things together to actually then help produce information for the senior leaders of the organization, maybe producing budgets and forecasts, what they think might happen next year. And then even at that strategic level, you can perhaps imagine that any board of directors will probably have a finance director or a chief financial officer. And so even at the very top level, I always thought that my accountancy qualification could lead me all the way to the board, as it has done. I'm now a director of a business. And let's just talk very quickly about the difference between practice and industry. You know, and even, you know, you may have some ideas already, because sometimes people are described as working in practice, sometimes they're described as working in industry. You know, feel free if you've got any thoughts at the moment. Quick look at that box. So maybe what any of you think about the difference between practice and industry might be. So lots of ideas coming in then. Well, just to keep it nice and simple, I actually qualified in practice when I started my career as an accountant. I went to work for an accountancy firm. You may have heard of it. It's called PwC. You may have heard of the likes of Deloitte, KPMG. These are large global accountancy firms. There are a lot of far smaller accountancy firms. Now, when you're working in practice, you work for a firm, and you'll then be doing work for different clients of that firm. One of the things that appealed to me about working in practice was the fact that it was going to give me an exposure to lots of different industries, lots of different sectors. You know, I worked in practice for about 3 years, and I spent a lot of time going to lots of different clients, some in construction, some in graphic design, some in manufacturing, some in food production. And it gave me a really great overview of lots of different sectors. But I only ever spent a couple of weeks at a time in each of those businesses. So you can imagine I was getting a breadth of experience, but none of it was terribly deep. If you work in industry, that would typically mean you work in the finance department of a particular organization. So you're there all the time, 12 months a year. Now, obviously, it means you're only getting exposure to that one business, that one sector, but you'll see it in huge amounts of depth. You know, you're there every single day looking at the decisions the business is making, looking at the way that their projects are being run. You'll probably get exposure to different sections like sales ledger and purchase ledger. So I always think practice is breadth but shallow, whereas industry is very narrow but very deep in terms of the experience that you will get. Well, that sort of covered the first couple of objectives for the sessions. We've talked about different roles from bookkeepers and accountants and auditors, talked about working in practice, working about in industry. Again, any questions any of you got about these, just drop them into the chat box and my colleagues will try and to pick up on them. But let's talk a little bit about accountancy qualifications, because as a general rule, when people go into careers in accountancy and finance, they will do a qualification. They'll do some more exams, which will actually give them some letters after their name. I have various letters after my name, which I kind of like, because it means that on the job market, you're perhaps more attractive. And we're actually joined today by representatives of what I think are a couple of the most prestigious global accountancy qualifications. Delighted they could be with us, which is AAT and ICAEW. Now, one thing that some of you may already have come across if you've done any research into accountancy is there are lots and lots of mnemonics, lots of abbreviations, lots of things you have to get used to. So what is AAT? Well, AAT is the Association of Accounting Technicians. So people who qualify AAT are sometimes referred to as accounting technicians. And actually AAT is a brilliant school leaver route. So for those of you who haven't yet gone to university, we see AAT as an increasingly common alternative to university. It's a great entry-level qualification to give some of the fundamental skills. And a lot of the employers I work with, they're very interested these days in school leavers. They're, you know, 10 years ago, they'd have preferred graduates coming out of university, but now they're just as happy to look at school leavers coming through something like AAT. AAT can then act as a springboard into qualifications such as ICAEW, the Institute of Chartered Accountants in Wales. That's the qualification I hold. I'm ICAEW. If you ever hear people talking of chartered accountancy, that's the one that they're referring to. And generally more appropriate for graduate entry. So those of you who are at university, it would normally be ICAEW. You would tend to step in as a starting point. But as I said, we do have representatives with us. So I am going to now hand over. We've got Dan Winterburn with us today, who is going to talk a little bit about the AAT. So I'm going to have to. Okay. You able? Good
stuff. Thanks, Gareth. Yeah, thanks for that intro. Good afternoon, everyone. Good to see you all. Well, not quite see everyone, obviously, but yeah, thanks for inviting me along. And yeah, I'm just going to go through a few slides now, just to introduce you to AAT. Feel free to drop any questions into there. As Gareth mentioned, we've got a few people that we'll be able to answer as we go through, and I'll try and pick up as we go through as well, and at the end of the presentation. First of all, just to introduce myself, I'm Dan Winterburn. I manage AAT student recruitment team, which is a team to support prospective students, as I'm sure a lot of the audience is today. So the content's quite hopefully relevant for you in terms of that audience. So if I can just share my screen quickly now, see if this will work. And I must admit, I didn't know you could do polls on Zoom, Gareth. So that was an interesting one.
Every day's a school day, Dan.
Exactly, yeah. You have to show me how to do that after. Oops. Everyone able to see? That worked, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can see it. I think you need to start the.
Yeah, start the presentation. Yeah, I'll just do that now. Good stuff. So, everyone see okay? Yeah, brilliant. So I'll get started. So just a few slides really, just to talk through or introduce you to AAT as a qualification, and then just to go into a little bit more detail about qualifications and where it can take you ultimately within your career. As Gareth mentioned, it's a really, really good starting point. And one of the great things actually, which I know Nick's a big advocate of, is you know, can talk from personal experiences. You know, it's such great stepping stone for a range of different careers, really, actually. So as this slide sort of shows here, there's a real different option in terms of your own business, working finance as well, moving on to chartered accountancy, working for a 30 company, working in a whole range of different industries such as fashion. And the other one as well, actually, is when you fully qualify, you can actually set up your own practice and offer services independently. So a real broad spectrum of different options available with the qualification. So Gareth's already gone through what AAT stands for, just a little bit more of a basic introduction to AAT, sort of who we are and what it is that we do. So we're classified as a professional membership body. The bread and butter of what we do really is we award accountancy and finance qualifications, appealing to quite a broad range of people, to be honest with you. So people that are completely new to accountancy, potentially school leavers, but quite often as well, people who may have a little bit of experience in accountancy or finance, but are looking to get that qualification under the belt as well. All of the learning is assessed by CBAs, computer-based assessments, the majority of which are on demand throughout the year, but we do have a couple that are in what's called synoptic windows, so they're at scheduled windows throughout the year. But apart from that, they're all held regularly throughout the year, which works really well with distance learning, but also classroom study as well, because it can be then flexibly integrated into different courses. So really just first of all, just to talk about the nature of the qualification. So AAT is a skills-based vocational qualification, and because of that, it's had a lot of success with employers in terms of the esteem in which it's held, because employers really like it, because someone that's done the AAT qualification has got the skills under their belt to go in and do the job to a competent standard. So that's where a lot of AAT's success has been. A lot of people will qualify with AAT, and that's enough for them. You've got a really good broad range of skills once you complete the final level of the accounting qualification, and even before that. So a lot of people, for them, that's enough, and they'll perhaps set up their own practice, as I described previously, or will be in a position to offer a range of different services. But there is the option of going on to do chartered accountancy after it, which is quite popular and tends to be what a lot of people do. And in terms of boosting earning potential, we do release periodically, sort of once every couple of years, we release what's called a salary survey, and that's based on data that we research across the accountancy profession for people that are qualified with AAT. And that really clearly shows, actually, hopefully someone might be able to put the link into the chat. If not, I'll do it in a second. But that research quite clearly backs up the fact that as you progress through the AAT qualification, you start to get the letters after your name, as Gareth mentioned a second ago, that really does put you in a good position with that level of credibility and status, and that really reflects quite clearly in an increased salary as well. It offers really, really good key skills for school leavers, a real mixture actually of not just technical skills, but some of the softer skills as well, particularly at level 2. So it's a really good starting point, stepping stone into getting some skills under your belt, getting a career started, and it can lead you in lots of different directions from there. But it's a really good starting point if you're in that category. So Gareth said it probably far better than I can do, but I suppose just a few points here in terms of what is it an accountant actually does. And as he's already talked through, there's quite a few different types of accountancy: management accountancy, financial accountancy, tax, etc. So quite a broad range, which AAT does cover. But here's just a few examples of the type of thing that accountants or bookkeepers do. So it's reporting those financial transactions. It's allowing a business to know how it's performing, which is really crucial. Gareth again talked through the management accounting side of things in terms of supporting that decision-making side of things, and efficiency as well. So looking at ways to reduce costs, very topical at the moment in terms of efficiency, and it's something that AAT accountants and bookkeepers are really able to deliver, and hence in demand from their clients or within industry. So bookkeeping versus accountancy. So bookkeeping is very much part of accountancy, and in fact I'll show you in a second that it forms part of AAT's accounting qualification, and that skill of T accounts, or double entry bookkeeping as it's sometimes referred to, underpins actually the rest of the qualification. It's a really important skill to get your head around, and in fact that underpins, as I said, AAT's accounting qualification. It's the first thing to get to grips with, and yeah, it's the first step in the accounting process, and it's a real keeping an accurate record of complete record, sorry, of financial transactions, and actually supports the analysis that comes from that. So accountancy, so it's building on the information from the bookkeeper, focusing on the bigger financial picture, looking at further, deeper analysis, which can support an organisation to move forward, and actually then classifying and summarising the data as well, interpreting it and reporting it back to the business or other stakeholders. So just to go into a little bit more detail about the qualifications themselves. So hopefully this slide helps to demonstrate, and I'm just going to talk through quite a high level. So first of all, on the bottom, you've got the level 1 Access Award qualifications. They're pretty basic. They're quite a good option if you've been out of education for quite a while, or you perhaps lack confidence with studying for whatever reason. It can be a good starting point, but actually the vast majority of people will tend to start at level 2, or what's otherwise referred to as the foundation level in AAT. So that, as is demonstrated on the left-hand side of the diagram, you've got the level 2 certificate in accounting, and that's where the vast majority of people with no prior level of qualifications or experience will start off if they're studying the accounting qualification. That consists of 5 modules altogether. There is another option, the level 2 diploma in accounting and business, and that's a slightly longer qualification. It can be done as part of full-time education, predominantly with further education colleges. So the majority of people do tend to just do the level 2 certificate in accounting, and that gives a pretty good range of skills to get you started, to then progress on to level 3 that comes after that. So level 2 certificate in accounting, just to clarify as well, I mentioned about double entry bookkeeping. That's the key topic actually at the level 2 certificate in accounting, but there's 5 modules altogether, including the synoptic assessment, which are held at those windows that I mentioned earlier in the presentation. Level 3 diploma in accounting introduces you to some management accounting actually at this stage. There's also advanced accounts prep as well, so there's some more financial accounting as well, and actually indirect tax, so you're introduced to some which is VAT, so you're introduced to tax at that stage as well. And that's 5 modules as well, typically taking about a year to complete, as is the case with the level 2 certificate in accounting, but it depends on how you study, if you do distance learning or classroom, for instance. And the level 4 diploma in accounting, that's a little bit longer, consists of 6 modules, 4 of which are mandatory, 2 are optional, and at that stage you can choose to do optional modules focusing on tax, for instance, or more management accounting. And that takes a little bit longer normally. That's more sort of 12 to 18 months altogether. And once you complete that stage, you're then fully qualified as an accounting technician. And then you can actually go on to achieve what's called MAT membership after that, MAAT, if you have the necessary work experience as well. The other option that's demonstrated on the right-hand side is our AAT accounting apprenticeship route, in which case, we offer currently 2 accounting apprenticeships. We just very recently introduced the level 2 one as well, but the ones that are more sort of embedded are the level 3 diploma in accounting and the level 4. So often apprenticeship level 3 and level 4, and typically the AAT qualification will form part of that in terms of the knowledge aspect of what you need to do to cover the accounting apprenticeship. And it needs to be at least a year in length, actually. That's one of the stipulations of an apprenticeship. So yeah, there's 2 stages you can do there. There's a level 3 apprenticeship and a level 4 apprenticeship as well, both that can lead you on to achieving that MAT membership as well. Just to touch on it quickly, so what we did a few years ago actually, so traditionally AAT's qualification is just an accounting qualification. What we did actually do a few years ago is take out a few of the modules from the accounting qualification and almost kind of repackage them into bookkeeping specific qualifications. So you've got the foundation certificate in bookkeeping, which is a really, really good starting point actually if it's something you're considering doing. It just consists of 2 modules, the key topic of which is the double entry bookkeeping, which we've talked about a few times already. But that's a really, really good starting point actually, and that takes about 3 months to complete on average. Then you've got also the Foundation Award in Accounting Software. Gareth mentioned previously, a lot of accountancy is automated or involves a software, and this module focuses on accounting software. So it's up to the training provider which ones to use, but Sage, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, that's quite common. but there's other ones like Xero, and there's other cloud-based solutions, so it depends on the training provider. But then you're assessed as well using the accounting software, so it's a really good skill and relevant skill to have as well. And then in terms of the bookkeeping route, finally, you've got the advanced certificate in bookkeeping, which is 3 modules altogether. It takes a little bit longer to complete. That's typically around 6 months. Once you achieve that, you actually then get the status or designation AAT-QB after that. So it's a really good way of getting qualified as a bookkeeper. In terms of progressions, we've talked about it already. A lot of people do go on to do chartered accountancy afterwards. All of the chartered accountancy bodies, does vary a little bit, but they all do offer some sort of exemption from their course actually. So it's a fast track to fully qualifying as a chartered accountant, and a really good stepping stone to do that. A lot of the chartered accountancy bodies give that feedback, that they find AAT qualified students are really well prepared to go on to do chartered accountancy. And then you've got the MAT or FMAT membership, that's fellow or member, and then F stands for fellow, and that comes after you've been a member for 5 years, and that's an extra level of status if you like, but that's a really good thing to achieve, and that's the qualification and relevant experience as well. And you've got the AAT-QB membership that I've already talked about, which is achieved after completing the level 3 advanced diploma in bookkeeping. So we talked about the qualification, but if you register, you do so as a student member, and that I guess sort of puts you as part of a club almost of fellow professionals, and there's some really good benefits as far as that's concerned. For instance, you can actually attend events. We've moved those to online for the time being, as you would expect, but they're sort of networking type events. I think they're one of the really good benefits of AAT membership that gets a little bit overlooked. But in addition to that, you've got sample assessments, which a lot of training providers use to supplement their own training resources, career tips as well, access to other e-learning modules like Greenlight Test, for instance, student forums, telephone support. So you get a really good package actually that's available for it. And that's £149 for the bookkeeping qualification, I think I'm correct in saying. I think £49 for the bookkeeping qualifications, and you pay transactionally for each of those different bookkeeping qualifications as you progress through, and you get a similar type of benefits. So that rounds up that was quite a whistle-stop tour really of AAT, a little bit limited for time. So as I said, it was a little bit top level. One thing just to mention is we've got some really good case studies actually on our YouTube channel that I would recommend having a look at. That helps to bring things to life a bit more and give you a little bit more context. But just to round things off, there's a few case studies here actually. So just to reflect the broad range of opportunities that come with doing AAT. So you've got Laura here, and she was able to work for, so we talked about the kind of broad range of sectors that you can end up in. She actually ended up in the motorcycle industry via the apprenticeship route. So one of the things that is really appealing, I think, for people more and more is apprenticeships. You hear more and more about that because you get the work experience, you avoid the university debt, etc. Not to discredit university, but I think that where it's become so big makes AAT more of a compelling option. And yeah, as you can see, this person here, Laura, did really well going via the apprenticeship route and has had a really good career in that industry. This one here, Ashley, is focusing a little bit more on the side of things of someone that's run their own business. So she's actually gone into the cake industry, as you can see, and actually helped her to set up her own business. Having those skills at her disposal was really beneficial as far as that's concerned. And then finally, we talked previously as well about going into the financial services industry. So Arman was able to secure a job with Morgan Stanley Investment Bank, actually. So has gone on to have a really good career there. So quite a diverse selection of people you can see there, and different things they've gone on to, reflecting what we've talked about already. So as I said, you can go and actually see it brought to life through videos actually on the YouTube channel. And sometimes it can be a bit contrived case studies, but actually in this instance, I think they're really good. You'll see really genuine accounts of people that have gone on to have these really successful careers. So I would check it out if you get a chance. It pretty much rounds things up actually. So thanks for listening. I can see the chat's been going off actually. I don't know, Nick, I think you were going to come on and say a few words actually.
Yeah, I'm just conscious of time. I actually did AAT and I also did ICAEW. So I'm a big fan of both qualifications, and equally as proud of them both. I've got both certificates on the wall behind me. You can only see AAT, it's not because I'm favourite towards AAT. But I think AAT is a fantastic qualification. And what I really like about AAT is, employers know it, they like it, and it's almost like a proving ground for people that it's kind of like the industry standard. You do your AAT and then potentially go on to do further qualifications, which is what I did. I did AAT and then I used it to get quite generous exemptions from ICAEW. And after qualifying, I didn't just drop AAT. I'm still a member of both qualifications, and I get great value out of both. And what I really like about AAT is once you get become a member of AAT, you get professional letters after your name that we've mentioned, which when I was a practicing accountant, a lot of our clients didn't know what MAAT actually stood for, but it adds a lot of professional gravitas. Every time you send an email, you've got MAAT, or even if you've been a member for 5 years, you get FMAT after your name. And you're actually part of not just an awarding body, but it's also a membership body. And you meet some great people. It's great for networking. You've got like the local branch network, which I'm actually on the North Yorkshire branch. And you meet people who in all walks of life, people who work for themselves, people who work in industry, and that's what's really great about AAT. So quite a broad qualification. So Gareth mentioned about financial accounting and management accounting, and AAT will give you experience of both of them. So you can sort of see which one you prefer, where you want your career to go. And then as you progress through AAT, as Dan mentioned, you do get optional units. So by that point, you might think, I want to veer towards financial accounting and do tax, or you might prefer management accounting and go down credit control and cash and treasury management. And it's a vocational qualification. AAT change their qualification every 3 to 5 years, and what they look at what the industry is wanting people to do in their finance role at that point in time, and they update the qualification. So the new qualification that AAT looking to bring in 2022 is bringing in big data, AI. It's constantly keep in touch with the industry, and which is why employers really like it as a qualification.
I mean, I would echo that, Nick. I mean, the employers I talk to, they really value AAT and the skills it gives to the kind of school leavers. We mentioned that AAT is a great school leaver route, and actually you're a nice segue then, Nick, being both AAT and ICAEW, into our next speaker from the ICAEW. So if I can perhaps now turn to Jack.
Thanks, Gareth. Yeah, of course. I'm just going to try and share my screen so that you can see my slides. And with me today, I've actually been joined by Orkan Freeman, who's from Bishop Fleming, who's actually going through the AAT route and is currently an ACA trainee too. So I'm quite conscious of time, so I'll try and limit the amount of time that I'm going to be talking about 10 minutes, and then I'll get Orkan to sort of answer some of your questions that I've been going through the chatbot, or I have some sort of pre-made questions ready to ask as well. So my name is Jack Henman. I'm a Senior Marketing Executive for the Institute for Chartered Accountants in England and Wales. And over the next sort of 10 minutes or so, I'm just going to talk to you how the qualification integrates with the AAT, maybe debunk a few myths along the way. We've already mentioned a few times that you don't necessarily need to be good with maths in order to become an ICAEW Chartered Accountant. But yeah, we'll just get crack straight on. So ICAEW, it stands for the Institute for Chartered Accountants in England and Wales. We were created by Royal Charter in 1880, so we've been around for about 140 years, and over that long illustrious history, we've been protecting the quality and also the integrity of the profession, and also offering individuals very much like yourselves the opportunity to do a qualification known as the ACA, otherwise known as Associate Chartered Accountant. We currently have 153,000 members operating in over 150 countries. We've got 28,500 students, a quarter of those are international, and we have 6,000 authorised training partners to provide you with those vacancies to go on and accumulate that work experience and also complete those exams. So straight off the bat, I'm just going to show you the 5 main reasons why our students tend to choose the ACA qualification, also ICAEW as a professional membership body. So in terms of the community, you will then join that exclusive group, and you'll have that support and guidance from the 153,000 members, as well as the 28,500 students too. We'll have plenty of student societies across the country, across the UK, and as well as the other 22 countries that you can train in. Auckland could perhaps give a little bit more insight about what you do as part of that student society. There are plenty of social things, maybe not now due to the coronavirus outbreak, but there are plenty of ways in which we can keep connected and have that sense of community within the organisation and the institute. In terms of progression, so it's a question that I get asked quite regularly. How likely are you or am I going to progress through the qualification? So as you can see there, 90% of our students qualify to become an ICAEW Chartered Accountant. And in terms of the prospects that you can envisage and you can realise, is that you've got leadership potential if you do pursue the career as an ICAEW Chartered Accountant. So as you can see there, 77 of the FTSE 100 companies actually has an ICAEW Chartered Accountant working on their board. So creating those strategies and making sure that those companies retain and maintain that competitive advantage that they've strived to achieve. You've obviously got in some of the in the chatbot that I saw there were a few questions about, can I combine or couple accountancy with other industries and fashion in particular? Absolutely. We have students from all different degree disciplines too who choose to pursue a career as an ICAEW Chartered Accountant, and you actually get some really nice blends of degrees which complement accountancy really well. So you get engineering, you get psychology, it's a really good one to understand like consumer behaviour, and you find that the wider the variety, then the better the ideas that you get when actually working in a particular organisation. And then finally, you've got that support there. So as well as the 90% finishing and actually completing the qualification, 80% of our students finish it first time. So as mentioned, as Gareth mentioned, there are plenty of different job titles and avenues that you can go down. These are just some of the job titles that our members retain, and you can see that there's such a broad variety of different job titles that our members actually have. So I saw within the chat function that there were plenty of people asking about investment banking. That's definitely an option, and as you can see here, the list just goes on and on. Such things as forensic accounting, anti-money laundering. There are plenty of job titles available, or plenty of careers available to you. It's not just one particular vocation. And then in terms of industry, it's very much the same. So there's no limit to the amount of industries that you can actually work in. So there's actually plenty of options available to you. So you've obviously got all of those different career options and vocations. We've also got plenty of industries that you can target. So there might be a particular favourite in mind that you can pursue. So there are two main routes to becoming an ICAEW Chartered Accountant. There is the straight to work, and there's also going to university first. We're just going to talk about the straight to work first. So as mentioned, you can do the level 3 diploma with AAT, and then you can actually choose to do the level 4 apprenticeship with ICAEW. But if you stay on with AAT and do their level 4 diploma, then you can do something which is known as the ACA/AAT fast track, which means that from the there's 4 compulsory courses or modules with AAT. If I am not mistaken, there's 4 compulsory modules. That means that you get you're eligible for 3 credits towards ICAEW's certificate level. And there are 2 optional modules that you can take, which means that you can then do other 2 modules within the certificate. So from the 3 certificate level modules, you can do accounting, business tech and finance and management information from the compulsory. And then from the optional list, you've got assurance and principles of taxation, but you need to ensure that you do external auditing and personal and business tax with AAT in order to get those credits and be eligible for them. And then once you've completed that level 4, you can then complete the remainder of the ACA in a quicker time in comparison to those who finish the Diploma 3 and then start the ACA from scratch. Alternatively, you can actually join a level 7 apprenticeship, which means that you would go from like an entry-level position and you would stay with a authorised training employer for up to 4 to 5 years, and then after the end of that process you then become an ICAEW chartered accountant through those 4 to 5 years, accumulating that work experience and also passing the exams too. So, like I've just mentioned, these are the 3 accounting, business, technology and finance and management information. Those are the 3 modules which you can or are eligible to claim exemptions for when you do the compulsory modules with AAT at level 4 level. And then these are the 2 optional ones that you can take. So in actuality, what you might find is you could get up to 4 credits for the certificate level exams. And then moving on to the professional and the advanced, very similar to what Daniel was mentioning about AAT, these are all computer-based assessments. So certificate level, you can actually take those throughout the year, and then professional level and the advanced level, they're periodically taken. So you have to book in all of your exams, but certificate level, you can book those throughout the year. Professional and advanced, there are definite times within the year that you have to book those and take them. And then these are sort of the benefits of doing an accounting apprenticeship with ICAEW. So it improves your long-term career prospects, provides access to networking opportunities, and you can actually get the qualification quicker than some of your peers, and you might not necessarily have to be placed into debt if you were to go to university. Now, alternatively, you've got the graduate route too. So the good thing about ICAEW and the ACA qualification, and many of the 6,000 authorised training employers who we actually work with, is you can actually study any degree discipline and actually still do the ACA. So our guide around the minimum requirements is about a 2-1, but depending on the authorised training employer who you go to, that sometimes there is a bit of flexibility, but our guidance is to get a 2-1 in your degree. Then you'd be placed on a contract with that particular authorised training employer, and these training employers can be found all over the country and also in 22 other countries excluding the UK. And you would be on their training program. You'd be assigned a QPRT, a qualified person responsible for training. They'd be your mentor, and they would be responsible for, if you wanted to confide in them, maybe you're finding the exams quite challenging, or maybe you need some advice on some of the ways to revise. They'd be there to help support you and guide you, and is one of the contributing factors as to why such a high percentage of our students actually passes. We've got that structure in place with our close partners to help students actually go through the process, and we ensure that they're supported in every sort of way that they can. And then you've got employer affiliated degrees. So this is probably more appropriate for those who are considering going to university. So these are degrees which have been sponsored by an authorised training employer. So the most popular ones are like PwC Flying Start programme, which are available at Henley Business School, Newcastle and the University of Nottingham. And within this degree, you have, because the syllabus is very similar to the ACA syllabus and the modules, it would mean that you could claim, I believe it's up to 12 credits for those 15 exams that I showed you. And you would then spend the time which you're not at university, you'd be using that time to work for PwC and actually accumulate some of the work experience. So there's 450 in total that you have to get, which is equivalent to about 36 months. And you actually accumulate some of that work experience during university, but just not term time. And then you can have the option of joining PwC after you graduate, and then you'd spend the rest of that time then completing the ACA and accumulating the remaining work experience and going on to develop your professionalism. And also you've got a professional skepticism as well, modules and webinars and podcasts to listen to, and keep making sure that you're making the correct decision when no one's watching. So those are the 2 main routes. You've got the school leave route and the graduate route too. So this is what the traditional route would look like. So by the end of 2nd year, that's when you should start looking for training vacancies, and we actually have a job board specifically designed for those looking for exclusively ACA positions. You'd enter into a training agreement, so you go through the recruitment process. You then enter into that training agreement, usually around about September time, and throughout those 3 to 5 years, you complete the 4 main elements of the ACA training. Once you've completed those, you apply to become a member of ICAEW, and then you access and reap all the benefits of being an ICAEW chartered accountant. Okay, so these are the 4 main components which make up the ACA qualification. You've got 450 days of work experience that you need to gain. You've got those 15 exams that you need to pass. There are a variety of different ways in which you can get credits, whether that be through AAT, or perhaps you're studying an accounting and finance degree at a university, one of our partners in learning. It's important to check our website, which you can type into your browser ICAEW credits for prior learning, and then it will provide you with 3 data fields. You need to put in the university that you're studying at, the course that you're doing, and then the modules that you're doing too. And it will just show you how that syllabus that you're working towards now at university, how it aligns with ours, and how many credits that you can actually get towards those 15 exams. And then with professional development, these are a series of interviews every 6 months with your QPRT or your mentor at your authorised training employer. And what we're looking for in professional development interviews and that sort of communication with that QPRT is you need to provide examples of times where you've perhaps overcome a challenge or overcome an obstacle, and provide examples of when you've displayed really good ability to communicate and obviously problem solve. So it's very much we want to make sure that during this process we're giving you all of the tools and characteristics in order to propel you throughout the entirety of your career, to really give you those fundamental skills. And that's essentially what the professional development quadrant is all about, trying to equip you with those and help you to identify them and illustrate them. And then you've got professional curiosity as well. Now, this can be referred to as skepticism, professional skepticism too. And this is essentially making sure that you are staying up to date with our webinars and our podcasts to make sure that you are making the right decisions when no one is watching. So yeah, so these are the 6 key things which we tell our candidates to look at and to make sure that they enhance, to make sure that they can actually get their foot in the door at the authorised training employers. So yes, so this is our final slide. I just want to make sure if Orkan's available, because I'm just really conscious of time, and I'm just eager to get him on the chat too. Okay, awesome.
Hi, Jack.
Hi, you okay?
Hi, Orkan. Yeah, I'm in.
Yeah, so I can't actually see the chat at this moment. Oh yeah, here we go. Okay, so can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and why you chose? Because you're actually you've got AAT, haven't you? And you're currently an ACA student. So can you just tell us some of the main motivations behind that?
So I went into university initially to study accounting and finance, and I kind of soon after realized that it wasn't for me. I mean, the lifestyle was great, but you just realize when you're learning that I wasn't picking up a lot of information, so I needed to practice what I was effectively what I was being given. So I dropped out and looked into alternatives and found the AAT as an option. At the time, I didn't think at the time it was that popular, and then sort of went into it and got the work experience and the tuition that I was going to get at university. And then once I qualified, then the natural route for me was to go and do the ACA. Currently working as an auditor, but soon transitioning into corporate finance and restructuring.
Awesome. So you've got like quite an array of different sort of vocations to be going into. Can you tell us what your typical day includes, like a day in the life?
Yeah, so it varies. I think I saw a question earlier that said, if you work as an auditor, will you go into different sectors? And that's definitely a yes to that. For example, today I was working on an academy, and then I was talking to a client who, I won't go too much detail, but then who's in the motorcycle industry, same as what Laura is now in. But yeah, it does vary day to day. You can never really tell what you're going to get. Normally you have a week sort of booked in onto a client, but those days do tend to vary.
Awesome. And how have you found the exam so far in terms of like migrating from AAT over to ACA?
I think the transition from AAT to ACA was pretty straightforward, because the final year of my AAT tied in quite well with my first year of ACA. So some of the things we were studying in my first year at the ACA are fairly similar to what I've studied before. So it was a nice little entry into ACA. I managed to get some exemptions, but then it depends on each firm. But our firm had made us do the mocks just to make sure we're still competent at those on those modules. So we still kind of studied it in a way, also to make sure we don't miss out on anything at a later stage if you pick something up at an earlier stage that you then need. But so far so good. As you said, in terms of the pass rate, we haven't failed any yet. Currently studying that first intuition, so bit of a plug there. And also, yeah, 3 exams to go, so fingers crossed.
Awesome. So only three to go. That's amazing.
Advanced level, fingers crossed.
Yeah, I can imagine like you're putting a lot of effort into that at the moment, and yeah, all the luck in the future. So yeah, thanks so much for your time. If anybody has got any additional questions to ask, just make sure to put it in the chat feature. But if not, thanks so much, Organ, for your time. And yeah, that's my time as well. So I'd like to hand over to Gareth if no one else has got any other questions.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jack, and thank you, Orkan. That's fascinating. And actually, can I ask you a question, Orkan? Because I often talk to former students who are later on in their careers, and I often ask them about, you know, the skills that they use in their workplace, and often it's not really about the technical accounting, it's wider skills. So, you know, what broader career skills would you say you've been building through your AAT and now ICAEW, you know, qualification?
I think we touched on it earlier a little bit, but communication and working in teams being probably the most important things that I've kind of learned and have worked on. So whilst in college, I've studied with students from other, whether they're in industry or practice, from other sort of firms, and everyone's got their own experiences. So talking to them, working in groups to get presentations done, has been a key element. That's one of the things I thought I would miss by not going to university, because I thought it would be something that I'd need to work on in my own time. But actually, I've been using that quite a lot, and that comes in handy when working within a practice, because you have to communicate with several different departments to get an engagement complete.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, and I think the nature of accountancy has changed so much in recent years. You know, the automation, the AI, the computerization of the, you know, I think it's great because it takes away a lot of the kind of number crunching, that kind of input driven stuff that actually used to give accountancy quite a bad name, perhaps for being a bit dull. That's all been computerized actually, and it's allowing accountants, I think, to demonstrate far broader skills. In fact, I think the ICAEW, they did some research last year looking at the key skills that accountants needed, and they then mapped those skills to other professions like law, banking, and they identified, I think, that 80% of the skills of an accountant were the same skills as other professions, and that only about 20% were specific to accountancy and finance, which it goes back to this point, I guess, that, you know, for me, when I was going into accountancy, I must admit, when I was leaving school, leaving college, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. And for me, accountancy was about keeping loads of doors open, because I figured, you know, every type of organization needs accountants, every country in the world needs accountants. So, you know, I just thought it was a great way to actually allow me to move into, you know, potentially all sorts of careers. I mean, it's really interesting here that you're thinking about moving into corporate finance.
No, I'd agree with you in terms of going to uni. I kind of personally didn't have a clue what to do, and I was okay at maths. So I thought, oh, here we go, let's do something that will potentially use those skills. And I ended up going into accountancy, and I later find out that actually you get a calculator, so you don't actually need to be that good at maths, or you can use an Excel spreadsheet to problem solve. So most of my day-to-day, I didn't mention it involves talking to clients. So building those soft skills at a training stage is so important, because later on in your career, so when I I go into corporate finance, one of the biggest things I'll be doing is talking to clients on the day-to-day. So it's quite an exciting role in that, in the sense that you're out there, you could see what the client wants, you could see when you complete an engagement, the effect it has on someone. It's quite rewarding in a way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, it's what drew me into accountancy, and it's interesting that poll I did right at the beginning around the words that people thought accountancy was about, and actually communication was one of the lowest. So hopefully we've done a lot to change that impression. You know, accountancy. I always thought the accountant, you know, they're the one person that will talk to every other part of an organisation. You can imagine the accountant's got to be talking to production and sales and marketing, and they almost communicate, you know, they sort of act as the central point of all this information. So, you know, it's one of the things that really appealed to me about it. There's a couple of points I thought I'd just sort of mention for the audience. Actually, there's been a couple of mentions around apprenticeships, you know, both by Dan and by Jack, and apprenticeships have become a very, very important part of training of accountants at all levels. And I just thought I'd stress this because I know a lot of parents, a lot of teachers, a lot of careers advisors, they're still saying what was true 15 or 20 years ago, which is when apprenticeships were, you know, perhaps suited to people who weren't very academic. I've had a lot of parents saying, oh no, my daughter or son shouldn't do an apprenticeship, they're quite bright. Apprenticeships are totally different now. Apprenticeships are for everybody. You know, we train, some of my very strongest students are apprentices now. Graduates go on to apprenticeship programs. So it's a very different world. So just be a bit careful if you hear negative stories about apprenticeships, particularly from sort of the older generation. I thought I'd also mention around exemptions. You know, there are exemptions available if you've done AAT before you move on to ICAEW. There are exemptions if you've done certain degrees. I always think exemptions can be a bit of a poison chalice because, you know, it sounds great that you miss an exam, but you also miss the learning that goes to that exam. And when you move to the higher levels, they still expect you to know those syllabuses that you're exempt from. And it may be something you did in the first year of your degree, potentially 2 or 3 years previously. And we actually get quite a lot of issues with students who have lots of exemptions, but don't actually really know the basics and the fundamentals. One of the things I really love AAT for actually is it just gives those fundamentals. You know, when I'm teaching final level ICAEW students, you can kind of tell the ones who came through AAT because they know the basics, they know the real fundamentals very well. So just thought, you know, just pick that up. There's employers that we work with that actually won't let their students take their exemptions. They actually force them to sit the exams. You know, I think Orkin mentioned that he was forced to do some mocks, at least in papers that he'd been exempt from, just to check you have got that underlying knowledge. Because the thing is, you know, it takes 3 years to qualify ICAEW anyway. You've got to have 36 years worth of work experience along with the exams you pass. So, you know, you don't qualify quicker if you have a load of exemptions. It just means you come in at the top level exams, potentially with quite a shock in terms of what they expect you to still know. I just thought, actually, I've got a couple of other colleagues on the call, Ben and Tim, who've both, like me, taught chartered for many years, and I know they've been monitoring the chat box since we started. I'm just wondering, you know, is there anything you wanted to add or anything you've seen in the chat box that you wanted to chip in?
Shall I go first, Tim? Lots of stuff in the chat box, Gareth, about exemptions. And I think exemptions are always done specifically student by student. Very hard for us to comment generally on exemptions. I think there's really two things to bear in mind. If you've got a degree, that's great. But if you've got a relevant degree in accounting and finance, clearly that's going to open you up for more exemptions. But it would be very much your university mapping their degree qualification to the ICAEW's requirements for that. So that's done quite specifically. But we've seen lots of people asking questions today about exemptions and various ways they could therefore start.
Yeah, and again, you know, I really stress, don't get too excitable about exemption. I mean, we get students who come out of relevant accounting and finance degrees who've never seen debits and credits, never seen double entry, and yet they then got quite a lot of exemptions, and they come into the top level of some of the ICAEW exams, and they really struggle because they don't have that basic underlying knowledge.
Certainly. We're also seeing discussions around different industries that maybe people want to get into and see accounting as a way into an industry. So we've had people asking about fashion. I remember when I worked in practice, one of our clients did a big show at London Fashion Week, and one of my jobs was to go and reconcile all of the expense claims, which got me into some pretty cool parties at the end of the week as well.
Hey.
So, it is roots into different areas. I think a stat that I always like to quote is 1 in 5 CEOs of the FTSE 100 have actually got an accounting qualification as their route into the top of their particular industry sector. So they are not now working directly in accounting, but they have used it as a great way to get the skills necessary to develop careers beyond just numbers.
Yeah, I think I'd just add also, as Ben just said there, the different industries that people are talking about getting into. My history, a long time ago now, a long time before yours, Gareth, as well, but I was well, technically a professional squash player. Went to university, Loughborough. It was all great. I was heading towards what was, you know, a predetermined career for me. Clearly that all changed for those that can see enough of my body. But I was persuaded to look at the accounting profession in terms of my concern was my doors were getting closed and the corridors were getting narrower and narrower, and to look at the ICAEW qualification it was at the time, just to keep those doors and options open. And I took a look at all the people that were entering it in terms of where they'd come from. They might have done some engineering, or, you know, they'd done home economics or geography, or the likes of me doing PE and sports science. And the training was just fantastic. The breadth of experience that you got going through a training contract that not only gets you the technical qualification, but gives you what is probably as, if not more important, which is, you know, the actual experience of the different industries, different sizes of business, owners, and all their different challenges. And just that insight just sets you up for any type of career. And I did a bit of electrical wholesale management. I went to Aviva, or was Norwich Union, and did a bit of insurance stuff. And then someone persuaded me to get involved in training. And after a long story, here we are. But yeah, I would certainly urge people not to think that an accounting qualification is closing doors or narrowing any corridors. It fundamentally is going the other way, and it's giving you more and more options that are hugely respected across different industries. People will know what the AAT qualification is. People will know what the ICAEW qualification is, whoever you're talking to within in any industry. So yeah, opening doors, that would be my comment.
Yeah, that's exactly why I, went into accountancy in the first place, was not really knowing where I wanted to go, but feeling that would actually give me lots of options. And in fact, if I look back to the people I trained with, my friends who went through my ICAEW qualification with me, they've gone in all sorts of different directions. I've got a very good friend who is now a very senior merchant banker, so he went into banking. I've got friends who've stayed in practice. Remember, we talked about practice. I've got friends who are now managing partners of practice firms, but I've got plenty of friends who moved into industry and are now CFOs, chief financial officers, even CEOs, the chief executive officers. I've got, a friend of mine who actually went off to Africa. Now she runs charities helping bring water to villages in Africa. So, it literally can be an entry point into virtually anything. And one of the things, and I've seen a few comments actually in the chat box around the current state of employment, and actually, my view has always been whether the economy is good or the economy is bad, people need accountants. You can imagine if things aren't great, you kind of need accountants as much as if things are good. And actually the employers that we work with, we've been, you can imagine, spending a lot of time in recent weeks talking to the various employers that we work with in different parts of the country. And actually recruitment in accountancy seems as strong as ever, if not stronger. We've got plenty of employers we work with who are actually taking more on than they normally would at the moment. So, I think that's very positive, because you imagine that's probably not true of every industry. But, I think, people value, they understand the value of accountants who can then help them navigate their business's course out of this sort of situation. So, I've been very heartened and reassured, by what employers are saying at the moment. Have we got anything else in the chat box? Any of you want to pick up on, or anything, Nick, that you want to add?
I've got a few questions about experience, and you know, it's difficult to get a job without experience, and you can't get experience without a job. But you know, you've got to remember, it's not impossible. At some point in their life, everyone had no experience, and a few people are asking about extracurricular activities. You sort of set yourself apart. You know, it doesn't do any harm to do any volunteering as well. There's a good website called reachskills.org where you can sort of get that experience working for small charities, sports clubs, that kind of thing. And there's a few other people asking about other things that make us stand out, like foreign languages and things like that. Learning anything new is never going to do you any harm.
Yeah, and actually bear in mind, you know, we have got a session a couple of weeks where we will specifically be looking at careers and jobs in accountancy. We'll be looking at sort of CV tips, looking at interview tips, and that kind of process that hopefully some of you might then be able to put into practice to actually secure that kind of role. So do, you know, stick with the sessions. Remember, this is the first of 4, but we are coming very rapidly towards 5 o'clock then, so we've managed to fill the session very successfully there. So I would just like to thank firstly Dan from the AAT. Fantastic overview of, you know, what is, you know, and I've worked closely with the AAT for a lot of years now, and is, you know, it's such a robust, credible qualification, particularly like we said for school leavers going straight into the workplace at an early age who maybe decide university isn't for them. We see more and more youngsters who, you know, could easily have done a degree, just making a positive choice that that's not right for them. They want to, you know, get a vocational qualification. They want to get work experience. So thanks, Dan, for speaking on behalf of the AAT. Thank you very much, Jack, for speaking for the ICAEW, my own institute. You know, and, you know, I think, you know, I don't know what the stats are looking like for this year, but I know for the last 5 years running, the ICAEW has had record intakes. So they're up to, I think, 30-odd thousand students a year coming in. You know, again, showing, I think, the appeal of accountancy as a qualification, and a lot of those, you know, some of them will be coming through AAT, some of them will be coming directly in as graduates. So thank you very much, Jack, for your thoughts, and thank you as well, Orkan. Thought you were fantastic. Thanks for your input and your thoughts. You know, to have somebody who is both AAT and now nearly at the end of their chartered qualification has been a great insight. That's really good of you to come along and talk as well. And good luck with those final 3, literally at the final hurdle now. So good luck with getting those exams done. I'm just going to return briefly to my presentation. So let's just have a look back at the aims. So I'm hoping everyone will agree. We've talked about different roles and just the sheer number of roles there are in the world of accountancy and finance. Talked a little bit about those routes of practice and industry as potential ways to come into the career. I mean, I came in as practice, and I just thought that was a great way to get that breadth of exposure to lots of different sectors at an early stage. We've heard from the AAT and the ICAEW and talked a little bit about some of the routes into those. And I'm hoping we've inspired some of you to actually want to find out more. Do feel free to join us again next week at the same time, so 3:30 via the same link that you've used today. We will be circulating recordings of the sessions. I'm hoping I'll see some of you again next week. And again, you know, do your own research. You know, look on employers' websites. You know, look on the AAT and the ICAEW's websites. Loads of information on there. But feel free to leave any feedback in the chat box if you found this useful. If there's anything particularly you think we should cover in later sessions. But apart from that, thank you very much for joining us. Thanks again to our speakers. Thanks to my colleagues for helping out. And hopefully I'll see some of you next week. Enjoy your evening.